Hi everyone! So today I wanted to do a different sort of video and hopefully make this more of a regular series. And I've been in a very crafting mood as of late. One of the things I wanted to make were some K-pop album cover coasters. Because this is something I've been wanting to make for a while now, I thought this would be a good DIY type video to show you how I made these and to hopefully inspire you guys to make them yourselves as well, because I know some companies like SM like to sell coasters with album images printed on them, but those are really expensive for what they are, especially when you factor in international shipping. And it's really easy to make these yourself for a fraction of the cost. So right now I'm sharing my work table. You can see a few things on here. But for the coasters, I'm going to share the supplies I'm using and then go step by step what I'm doing so you guys can replicate this at home. So the first thing you need is just decide on what sort of coaster you want. I went with a square tile, and I picked this up on Amazon. And the nice thing about this tile is that it's smooth on both sides. You can buy these at like Home Depot or a crafting store. And typically the really cheap ones, like the dollar tiles or less than $1 tiles, they would have grout on them, which is not a deal breaker for this project at all. Really you just want at least one smooth surface. I just wanted these to lay nice and flat on my surfaces, so that's why I went with this one in particular. And the other thing that you need if you're using a tile coaster is some sort of adhesive to go on the bottom. So I have this square cork adhesive, and so you could just peel this off and stick it right on the bottom of this tile, just so that it doesn't scratch your surfaces. And if you can't find one of these easily available for cheap, you could also get little felt pieces, so little felt squares or circles to put on the back of these, or little cork ones as well. Really anything that you have on hand or something you could find for not very much. It should work. And I am using square tiles because that is the shape that album covers typically are, but from this video you could really use any image that you want. So you could have your favorite idol picture printed out, or some fan site airport shots, or some teaser pictures that you really liked from a certain era. And it doesn't have to be square. You can also find tiles that are circular. And then the next important part is to get the actual image. So I printed mine myself because I have a laser printer. So if you are planning to print these out yourself, make sure that you have a laser printer and not an inkjet printer. The gloss I'm going to be putting over these images to stick to the tile will make inkjet ink bleed. So it's not going to be as crisp or nice looking if you have that sort of printout versus a laser printer. If you don't own a laser printer, you can go to a print shop like Staples or someplace, and they could definitely print those out for you for like $1. So not very much. And honestly, their printers are a lot better than a lot of at-home laser printers. And so the albums I chose were some 2PM solo album images, as well as the 2PM logo. And you want to print these out a little bit smaller than the size of your tile. So the tiles I have are 4 by 4 inches. And so I just basically put this in a Word document and shrunk them just slightly smaller than the 4 by 4 image. You want to usually do that, especially if your tile has rounded corners, because if you want to stick something that's the perfect size and it kind of smushes down weirdly, it just looks, I think, a lot nicer when you have a border around the tile. And so you're going to want to cut these images out. I like to use just a regular board with a X-Acto knife and a straight edge. I have the most control when doing that, but you can also just use scissors if you have really straight cutting technique. I unfortunately don't, so I kind of have to use this method. And then the last thing you need is some sort of sealant. So I'm going to be using this brand, Podge, and you could get different finishes with this brand and other similar brands. I'm choosing the gloss finish because I want these coasters to be a little bit more glossy, but you could also use a matte finish if you could find a bottle of that. And I'm also using a film brush because I just like how the streaks look with this versus a regular paintbrush. But again, just use whatever you have on hand. Should be fine. And the last thing I'm going to be using in this video is not necessary, but something I want to do, and that is acrylic paint. And so because I printed these images slightly smaller than the square tiles, you're going to be left with a border, and I just want to finish off these borders so that there's a nice contrasting or complementing or complementary color to go with these images. So quickly, I'm going to share how I cut these out. I've already cut out the first sheet, as you see here, into nice even squares. And I'm just going to go, I guess, through one of these in case you guys aren't familiar with using X-Acto knives and straight edges. You want to line up your straight edge. Camera's making it a little awkward for me, but basically you just want to make sure that you're cutting away as close to the image as possible without leaving white space. So you just line it up like here and then drag the X-Acto knife on your cutting board. And I'll do this for all 4 sides. And be sure to have enough pressure on your straight edge so the image doesn't move around. And also cut, I guess, or press the X-Acto knife hard enough so that it does cleanly cut things, and you have to go back and try to loosen things that are kind of clinging. Last edge. You have it joining still a little bit, just delicately try to peel it away or run your X-Acto knife over it like this, so that it becomes free. And now I'm just going to go through these without awkwardly sharing on camera, and we'll get to the tile part afterwards. So the next step is to paint the borders of these tiles before we adhere the images onto the top of the coasters. Now this step is optional, but I think it looks a little bit more polished when you add paint. So for Junho's here, it's going to be the first one I work on. I chose yellow because there's yellow in the image, and it's also his group color, so I thought that was appropriate. And then we have gray for Woo Young's Matabokwa image, green for Taekyeon's Winter Hitari, pink for Nakun's Me Japanese album, purple for Chansung's Complex, this sea kind of aqua blue for Junkei's, just to kind of play with the colors on his album, and then just regular white paint for the group logo. So first thing you want to do is to get a surface that it's okay to have paint on. So I have a ton of these styrofoam pieces from when I moved that I still need to throw out. So I just put this on top of my table, and this is going to be my painting surface. If you don't have any of these, of course, just use newspaper or a sheet that you don't mind getting paint on, or just any surface will be okay. Just make sure it's thick enough that in case you do get paint on it, it doesn't bleed through to the other side and damage the floor or the table you're working on. The other thing I'll be using for this project is some more styrofoam, and that way when I paint the edges of this tile, I can make sure all the surfaces are smooth, and it will dry it like this instead of on top of the surface, because I will be painting a little bit of the bottom as well as the top for these coasters, just so I have a full wraparound border. Okay, so starting with the yellow border tile. So I'm going to just take the paint from the lid, which you're not really supposed to do this, you should use a palette. That way you don't like ruin the paint at all when you put it back. But we're doing this on the fly here, and I'll share how I paint this using a foam brush. So first I just go over on these sides lightly, and then I paint a little bit up into this border. The image that you printed off is going to cover this, so you don't need to worry too much about how straight the rest of the border looks. Then we do the next side. And you're going to want to do a few coats depending on how, I guess, bright you want the colors to pop. So I want this to really pop, so I'm going to do a few coats. And just make sure there's not really big globs or streaks when you do this. That way it looks a little bit neater. Now the last side. So we're going to set this on top of our raised little pedestal there. And because I do have a white image, just in case the yellow bleeds through, because I haven't worked with a yellow painted tile yet, I'm just going to paint the entire surface just this primary yellow color. So everything is uniform and we don't have any surprises when we start putting the image on top with Mod Podge. And so acrylic paint tends to dry really quickly. I'll just give it 5 minutes or so. And then put on another layer, just mostly focusing on the border. And then that should do it, since this paint is pretty thick. So as you can see, I have all my tiles painted now. I decided to just do a top coat on everything, just in case something bleeds through. And I want it just a consistent color underneath. Of course, it doesn't have to be fully painted in, like I just did a very brief wash on top of a few of them. But now I'm going to get into the Mod Podge process. And I'm going to highlight how I do this using Juneho's tile. So with the Mod Podge step, you're going to want to put a very generous layer on here. Don't be too conservative. I did that in my first try, and it was difficult sticking the actual image on here. So yeah, need more. And so you want it pretty coated because this is going to help stick the image onto this tile. And this does dry fairly quickly. So once you have that on there, you're going to want to lay this down. So again, be careful because you want this on here fairly straight without any air bubbles. So just want to smooth things out on here, and because we put a lot on here, you could move it around a little bit. Make sure it's all centered before it starts drying. And then you just want to stick more on top. And again, you want to be careful not to over manipulate this because once you do the ink or the laser printer starts to rub off. So just want to have a nice streak here. And because we have this also raised up on a pedestal, you could go and do the sides as well, delicately, while we wait for this first layer to dry. And you want to at least do probably 2 to 3 coats of this Mod Podge, just so that this image is nice and glossy. I apologize for the background noise. There's construction going on across the street. Right, so we're just gonna let this sit here and wait for the next layer. So the first coat generally dries within 10 to 15 minutes. And so when you're ready for your next coat, all you have to do is squirt a bit more. So we went horizontally the first time, so we're going to go vertically this next time. And even though the gloss looks like it leaves a white cast, and it's going to dry clear, which is the nice thing about Mod Podge. And just go to the sides again. Make sure those are nice and glossy too. And we're going to let this sit here and then wait for our third coat. And now we're just going to again go horizontally since we went vertically last time. I'm just going to go around the edges like this. Alright, so that should do it. And then after this dries, the next step is to put the cork on the bottom. So after a half hour or so, everything should be fully dry, which means we can now put the cork backing onto the coaster. So I have my little adhesive square here. So all you have to do is just peel this off. So you see how I did leave a little bit of a yellow border on the back? So that's just so we don't see cork on there. So it's not on there perfectly, but I'm pretty happy with it. And when you put it on a surface, your table top should be nice and protected from the tile. So I'm going to do all my other tiles and share how they all turned out. All right, so now I have all 7 completed with the little backings on them. And I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. I wanted some really colorful coasters, which is why I went with 2PM's solo albums rather than just their group albums, because to be frank, their group album covers aren't so colorful. But I'm pretty happy with how all these turned out. So they're not perfect, like the Wooyoung and Chansung ones aren't completely centered, so you don't have like a perfect border around them, but I feel like that's part of the charm of making your own little DIY crafts. The things you make aren't going to be perfect, but they usually turn out nice despite that. And another thing I wanted to mention is this sealant that we use, the Mod Podge, is really good for just regular drinks, but if you are drinking coffee or wine, which stains if it spills, these will also stain, so I recommend doing another coat. They have these nice sealant sprays you could use. I'm going to link one down in the description of one I ordered actually that's coming next week. So all I have to do is just spray these outside to give it a nice tough sealant so that these don't get damaged. So I hope this little tutorial was interesting for you guys and inspires you to make your own coasters. And again, you don't have to make K-pop album coasters or even just K-pop coasters. I chose to do album covers because I just wanted to have all the members represented and just another household good. But you could also do other things, like I actually made these for my brother the other night, but I made video game inspired coasters. So I asked him what his favorite video games were and decided to make these. And these are definitely not perfect. Like, this is an example of rubbing a little bit too much and lifting off the ink. And I didn't cut these out as nicely to fit in, that was upside down, to fit in the title of the game. But these are just really nice gifts you could give someone, or little crafts to make on your own. So, and if you want to give these as a gift, you could definitely just stack them up, and you could tie some ribbon or twine around them, like this. You might want to, this is really thin, so you might want to double it up. But it's a nice little project and a little gift you could give with the holiday season coming up. So I hope you guys like this video. Let me know if you plan on making your own coasters. And also let me know if you'd like the series to continue. I have some other K-pop inspired crafts in mind to do little tutorials on. So let me know down in the comments if that's something you would be interested in. Until my next video, bye guys.